Hey, how are you doing? Could things get really dangerous here? I ran across my middle school girlfriend from back when I was on a helicopter trip with my coworkers. She introduced the older man she was putting arms with alongside her without my asking. This is my significant other. He works for a hotel company as a manager. And you most likely failed the admission tests for high school. Is this just some ungrateful middle school graduate now? Laughing, she said. But all of a sudden, the pilot became ill and an emergency arose. What the hell is going on? My girlfriend of the past cried out in horror. Saying this with composure, I'll fly the helicopter instead. What? My name is Sean. I work for an airline as a captain. I have always enjoyed airplanes and have requested my dad to take me to the airport frequently since I was a young child. I once spent a holiday reading my favorite aviation encyclopedia while waiting in the airport lobby. Out in front, I heard a voice calling out to me. Do you like airplanes too? I saw a girl of my age with pigtails of blonde hair when I looked up. She gave me a questioning look and gestured to my encyclopedia. I'm Ashton. It is about to take off on the following flight. Do you want to see the aircraft with me? Ashton took hold of my hand and dragged me along before I could respond. Her audacity confused me a little, but I was happy to have connected with another aviation lover. She told me she used to go to the airport to see her father off. He was a frequent traveler for work. Planes are so huge, but how do they even fly? Ashton whispered as we watched the aircraft calmly wait for its occupants on the runway. I flipped open my encyclopedia and excitedly imparted my knowledge. The wings create lift, which pushes against the air, and then the jets thrust the plane forward and up into the sky. She hadn't inquired, so I continued my enthusiastic explanation of how planes operated. When I eventually finished, Ashton inquired, Do you want to build airplanes someday? As she listened in amazement. Yeah, I happily nodded. However, Ashton put her palm on her chin and had a serious expression on her face. She suddenly brightened and remarked, I think I like pilots more, as she saw a pilot go past. Don't they look so awesome in their uniforms flying the plane? I was simply glad to have a friend who shared my passion for airplanes, even though I didn't completely get what she was saying at the moment. I therefore made a careless pledge. Okay, I'll become a pilot, and when I do, I'll take you on a flight. For better or worse, this experience shaped my entire life. I saw a girl in my class when I first started elementary school, and she was still the same blonde with pigtails. Is that you, Ashton? Do you still recall me? At the airport, we got together. I walked up to her, excited beyond control. Oh, you're the guy who used to adore airplanes. What a coincidence that we are currently attending the same school. Doesn't it feel like fate? We clicked right away, and even though we were still young, I couldn't shake the feeling that our paths were meant to cross. Do you remember the promise we made back then? I inquired. I do, of course. I promised to marry you when you became a pilot, Ashton replied, acting older than she actually was and even teasingly promising to propose. After that, I took my desire to become a pilot very seriously and started studying geography, meteorology, and navigation in addition to standard academic courses. I also refrained from playing video games in order to preserve my vision, which was essential for training to be a pilot. As far as possible, I likewise avoided watching TV until absolutely essential. I found it difficult to participate in my classmates' chats and was unable to keep up with what was popular at school, which made my school days seem difficult and drawn out. But then I thought back to the promise I had given Ashton, and I told myself I didn't need any more friends as long as I could continue to remain close to her in order to keep my word. I continued to work hard by myself. When my parents saw how committed I was, they started to help me too. Rather than dissuading me from pursuing my passion, they bought me books to aid in my studies to become a pilot. My dad used to take me go-karting on the weekends so I could practice. I once lost track of my parents in the packed airport while on a trip that was part of my family's studies and leisure itinerary. When I was a little child, I became scared and started crying. A man with a pilot's cap suddenly walked over to me. "Hey, how are you doing? Are you apart from your parents?" "Yeah." "Well, how about we go find them together?" I went to the lost and found apartment with him. After a general announcement was made in the airport, I waited for my parents to arrive. He stayed with me, keeping me company as we waited. "Do you like airplanes?" "Yeah." "Hey, let me tell you something. My occupation is flying." "Are you serious? One day, I want to be a pilot." "How did you end up being one?" "That's fantastic. To become a pilot, I had to study a lot. It was difficult, but you were capable as well. One day, I hope to see you piloting aircraft and donning a headgear similar to mine." "Yeah, I'll do my best." I got the strength I needed from talking to him, and before I realized it, I no longer felt afraid. Soon after, my parents came, and I said my goodbyes to the gracious pilot. However, his advice stayed with me, and I started to look up to him as a pilot that day. "I'm going to be a cool pilot like that man," thought I. I had an even busy schedule when I started middle school. I, of course, began to spend less time with Ashton. But I figured she would understand, as she was aware of my desire to become a pilot and had always been supportive of me. But Ashton started talking about her frustrations over time. "My pals and their guys go on a lot more dates. Do you really not give a damn about me?" My workload from studying was so heavy that I wasn't always patient. Some days I ended up yelling at her. "To honor my pledge to you, I'm studying really hard. Are you blind to that?" We began to argue more and more, our discussions invariably devolving into war. This continued for a few rounds before my relationship with Ashton started to go south. Time went by with nothing we could do about it. Then, one day, as I was getting ready for my entrance examinations to high school, something occurred. I was studying when I came upon a scene that stopped me cold on my way back from the library. Ashton was strolling hand in hand with an unknown man, appearing quite comfortable. I went home and began second-guessing myself since I lacked the guts to approach her at that point. Perhaps it was nothing at all. Or perhaps it was just a close relative. I told myself that, but the following day I made the decision to speak with Ashton directly. "Hey, who was that guy you were with yesterday? Is it really that important? It's not like you have any say over who I spend my time with because we're not married or anything. I can spend time with anybody I choose. Besides, you ignore me, so I was just passing the time," Ashton stated without expressing any regret. I tried to force a response out of my parched mouth, only to find that I hated Ashton. Without anything to respond, I turned to leave. All I needed to do right now was concentrate on my academics. I continued thinking about her remarks and found it impossible to focus at all, even though I tried to tell myself. After all, the promise I gave Ashton had to do with my dream of becoming a pilot. Did being a pilot really matter any longer if this was how things were between us now? Why had I put forth so much effort? I started to lose focus on why I was pursuing my dream. I eventually lost interest in my academics and was unable to get into the high school of my choosing. Ashton was enraged to learn that I had failed my tests. "What? Is my significant other retaking a class? That is not excused. You tolerated me for so long, telling me you were taking care of me. And now this. Never get in touch with me again. An engagement ring from our childhood. That isn't true." And with that, she immediately ended our relationship. Wait, hold on. I nearly came up with an explanation, but it was watching Ashton go with such ease that I realized our relationship was really finished. I went home and locked myself in my room. For how long have I been doing this? Was this catastrophe the result of all my efforts? Books on aerodynamics and pilot certificates crowded my bookshelf. I thought about tossing it out, But then I noticed one rather tatty airline encyclopedia. Yes, the exact book I was holding when I first met Ashton. In retrospect, I realized that book was the catalyst for our friendship and the reason I wanted to become a pilot. My life suddenly came back to me in a flash. The late-night study sessions I spent massaging my tired eyes, the smiling faces of my parents as they listened to me talk about my dreams, and the day I met the man who would eventually become my role model at the airport. Once more, I asked myself, what do I truly want to do? I finally realized that I didn't want to give up. It was all for my promise to Ashton initially, but it had evolved into something more. I understood that my progress was being fueled by pride, expectations, and adulation. I got myself together after that and carried on with my studies. I didn't have to retake a year of school because I had really obtained a position at another institution. After attending aviation school and earning my commercial pilot license, I accrued flight hours to serve as an instructor before being employed by a small airline. After extensive training, I eventually attained co-pilot status. I continued to train with the captain even as a co-pilot, and at the age of 32, I was promoted to captain. My friend Walter, who started working for the airline the same time I did, volunteered to take me on a helicopter tour as a way for us to celebrate. Walter and I were waiting in line for our turn on the day of the tour when I heard a familiar voice. "What? Are you also present here?" I looked over and saw Ashton walking hand in hand with a man in his middle years. Even though she was now a mature woman, I could still recognize aspects of her from when we were in middle school. She started bragging without my having to ask. "Oh, Tony, this dude is my boyfriend. He works for this airline as a section chief at a chain of hotels. How about you? I take it that you gave up on being a pilot and are now merely a middle school graduate. And there are two guys here, really. Is this a date or something similar?" She teased me with a sarcastic laugh. Walter appeared to be poised to blow out after overhearing. "What on earth are you discussing?" "This individual." However, I quickly covered his mouth since I didn't want to be around her any longer. "I apologize, but you're going to have to cooperate with me here," I said to him. "Yes, it is correct. It seems like you're doing okay." I gave her a cool response and chose not to answer her further. "Have a nice flight," she replied. When Ashton and Tony's turn finally arrived, they were clearly becoming agitated because they were not being called in. Ashton finally lost it and began yelling at the employees. "Hey, it's been 30 minutes since we left. What is happening?" "Well, actually, the helicopter pilot fell a short while ago, and we're currently trying to figure out a solution," the troubled-looking staff member replied. Tony raised his voice and joined in upon hearing this. "What? This cost a lot of money that we paid. Sort things out right away. Can't you locate another pilot?" Staff members were stuttering, "I'm sorry." "Hey, looks like this is your chance," Walter said softly in my ear as he observed the chaos. "Teach that horrible woman a lesson and show them what you've got." I was a flight instructor back then, and even though I was really busy, I had managed to obtain a helicopter license, so I could fly one just fine. Though there was a tiny part of me that wanted to prove something, I really didn't want to get connected with Ashton. I reluctantly moved ahead to talk with the employees. "If it's okay, I can fly the helicopter instead." I spoke, and Ashton and Tony just gazed at me, stunned to silence. The personnel asked for further instructions by radioing upwards after I showed them my pilot's license. The personnel returned after a little while, said, "Thank you for your help," and led me to a room where I could change into the outfit that had been prepared. I received a briefing before getting ready to board the helicopter. Ashton and Tony were led over, looking perplexed, while I was getting ready. Ashton's doubts about me realizing my dream disappeared from her eyes the moment she saw me in uniform. Her mood turned totally, and she gave me an admiring look. Sensing the uneasy tension, I had to add a little revenge of my own. "Are the two of you dating?" I'll see to it that you have an amazing flight beneath the stars. I'll work really hard to make it unique for you." Still stunned, Ashton was unable to reply. Disregarding it, I began narrating the tour as though I were speaking to myself. The Statue of Liberty, a representation of New York, is visible to your right. It was a gift from France in 1886 and is now used as a representation of democracy and freedom in the U.S. And Manhattan will be to your left. Ashton was astonished at first, but she eventually began to pay attention to my commentary. When the tour came to a conclusion and we touched down, her eyes were nearly glistening with appreciation. Tony's expression became apprehensive upon realizing this. With a composed expression, he fixed his suit, dug into his pocket, and gave me a tip. "I want to thank you for the amazing flight. I've attached a small item for your inconvenience." "Many thanks for it. Enjoy the remainder of your evening," I murmured, glad that the task was finished and eager to get out of Ashton's sight. But Ashton interrupted, frowning at Tony. "What are you doing, in your opinion? Don't get in my way." I was going to invite him out to dinner and tip him. She was reaching out of her seat and putting her arm around mine before I knew it. At the same moment, Tony and I both shouted out, "Huh. Isn't this guy your boyfriend?" I questioned with hesitation. Ashton answered confidently and shamelessly, "Well, he was. However, you are now my fiancé. Now that we're back together, the previous commitment comes first." "I'm not really sure what you're discussing. Remember that you were the one who ended our relationship. You acknowledged that our childhood pledge was meaningless. In addition, I'm over my affections for you," I said icily, attempting to make sense of the strange circumstances. But Ashton was not going to give up. "That is untrue. Did you not turn into a pilot for me?" "No. I did it out of pride and ambition for myself. Not wanting her to get the wrong idea, though I do appreciate you for giving me the initial push," I smiled and continued. For a moment, Ashton was astonished, but then he snapped out of it. She gave a sultry whatever, "I'm done with this," and turned back to Tony. Her voice suddenly became lovely as she inquired, "Hey, what should we eat tonight?" Tony answered, "I guess I'm not your boyfriend anymore, right?" Tony was frowning at her now. "I didn't realize you were that gullible. We're through. Never again reveal your face to me." He then gave her such a hard shove that Ashton instantly fell on her ass. "You're so mean." Ashton started crying uncontrollably. "I should be the one crying," mumbled Tony, obviously embarrassed, and hurried off. "Are you all right?" the staff asked as they came over to see how Ashton was doing. She appeared to understand then that everyone was observing her. She whispered, "I'm fine," her face turning a hot crimson, and she made a short bow before hastily turning to leave, her head down. I grinned sarcastically as I watched her go, thinking, it's unbelievable I ever felt anything for someone like that. I turned to Walter and expressed my regret for the outcome. "I apologize, dude. I destroyed your festivities." "Nope, everything is okay." "I thought that was very entertaining," he laughed. Then he grinned mischievously and began making jokes about me. "I'm just relieved that you once had a girlfriend. I had been beginning to worry about you. But really, dude, that relationship of yours was unique. I would prefer to move past that aspect of my history. Let's not discuss it ever again." The personnel chased after us while we were having fun. The pilot who had been feeling under the weather seemed to be totally recovered. Walter and I made the decision to book our own helicopter excursion after learning that. Inside the helicopter, the pilot said, "Thank you so much for today," expressing his sincere gratitude for me filling in and his profuse apologies for having to miss the flight. The pilot then abruptly made me an offer to work for him. "I've heard you flew perfectly. Why not join our team as a worker if you're interested?" I chuckled at first, thinking he was kidding, and said, "Oh no, it wasn't that great." But I could tell he was serious by the look in his eyes. I decided to pretend to be serious as well and graciously rejected. I've wanted to be an airplane captain since I was a kid, so I still want to keep flying planes. Despite his somewhat dejected expression, the pilot grinned and remarked, "I hope we get to work together someday." I received criticism for using another company's helicopter without my own employer's consent a few days later. But I didn't get penalized because it was an emergency, and I had the pilots and the staff's backing that day. I have a full calendar of flights and am in great demand for my flying abilities right now. I've been so busy that I hardly ever get time to go home, and I still lead a solitary existence without a significant other. But I really am appreciative of Ashton for encouraging me to pursue this ambition, my parents for their support, and the pilot I met at the airport. I wouldn't be where I am now without them. These individuals enable me to find fulfillment in my profession each and every day. With the hope that one day I will inspire someone else as well, I have now taken to the skies once more.